Hello, it's Martin back with yet another VW ID.3, but this one is not mine. It's a courtesy car because mine has been stuck in a workshop for over a month. That's a story for another day. So I thought I would take this opportunity to show you around the latest facelift iteration, as there are many changes which ID.3 owners have been asking for. Let's start with a quick walk around of the exterior so you can appreciate the cosmetic changes. Firstly, VW completely ditched the black plastic trim piece on the trailing edge of the bonnet. Many people thought that was there for aerodynamics, but in fact it turns out it was purely aesthetic. Now, with it removed, the bonnet appears visually longer, which would give the car a slightly more sporty character, but realistically it still has that inflated MPV look, so it doesn't make much of a difference in my eyes. The easiest way to spot the facelift is by the front bumper, because the cooling intake has been redesigned, and combined with the side breathers, which guide air over the front wheels to aid with aerodynamics, it gives it a much more aggressive stance. The side profile and all the metal panels are the same. Realistically, that would be too much to change just for a mild facelift. There are some new designs available for the alloy wheels, and in the back previously, just the tail lights used to light up, and this bit which continued into the tailgate, that was just a design element, but now that section lights up as well. But let's be honest, most people didn't mind the outside, it's the interior which was problematic. But I'm happy to report that's where VW focused their efforts, because there's a lot of improvements. Let's start with what's present across all versions of the ID.3 facelift, and that's improved interior materials. Back in the day, the door cards used to be quite hard plastic, and while this is still quite difficult to show on video, it is nice and soft touch, and there is that typical ID triangular texture to it. It's very prominent when you look around the door handle, because you can tell this is hard plastic, but then the padding almost sticks out a couple of millimeters. And these textured fabric inlays now stretch further into the door card, so it all looks a little bit more premium. If you look further down at the door card, you can still tell that it's built to a budget. All of this is hard plastic. There is a very thin layer of felt to stop things from rattling about in the door pockets. And yes, there's also still that infamous piano gloss black trim on all the grab handles, which has in fact already been stained. Likewise, to keep costs down, the interior door cards are pretty much hard plastic from the top all the way to the bottom, other than that fabric insert where you would rest your elbow, so at least that's nice and comfortable. But overall, I actually do like the look of the fabric. It is, technically speaking, the base level interior. It has a nice texture to it, different colors and contrasting stitching. Speaking of stitching, the dashboard has been improved as well. The top of the instrument panel always used to be soft touch, and that's still nice and squidgy. But now that soft material which is in the door cards is also extended onto this section of the dashboard, which you always see and you would potentially touch, with the contrasting stitch line to spruce it up a bit. So is there still room for improvement? Absolutely, but it at least is no longer offensive, because you have to keep in mind when the ID.3 launched, the interior really felt plasticky, especially for the price point. If you are buying these used for less than £20,000, then it's perfectly adequate, but paying 50 grand for a car where basically everything is hard plastic, especially from a company which prides itself on interior quality, ergonomics, etc., it just didn't quite sit right. One area which did take a bit of a downgrade are the steering wheels, specifically the wrap of the steering wheel rim. If you look very closely, it's a little bit more textured than it used to be, and that's because it's now a man-made material. In other words, it's one of those vegan leather materials. And don't get me wrong, I absolutely love the fact that no animals had to be harmed in the process of making of it, and it still feels nice and premium, but there have been reports of it wearing quite quickly. I believe if it starts tearing within warranty, you do have the option to go back to a leather steering wheel, but it's just a bit of a shame that VW didn't opt for a more rugged material. Like them or hate them, the touch controls are still present. I personally never found them to be problematic. The only thing is that the layout has been slightly altered, so I still haven't gotten used to these ones. Basically, the view slider is no longer a slider, it's just a button. The slider now changes the track you are listening to or the radio station. You have a dedicated button for your heated steering wheel, and the other side is very similar with your adaptive cruise, but the volume has been moved down from the right side to the left as a slider yet again. Behind the steering wheel, however, the gear selector has been removed from the side of the instrument display and now has been relocated onto here. It still works just like before, so you twist it forward for drive, back for reverse, and you push the end in for applying the parking brake. But that means that there is no longer a dedicated stalk on the right side, so all the functions have been unified onto this properly fat stalk, with the wiper switch being inside of the stalk essentially, and the indicators working as normal. All of those changes are pretty minor, but what has undergone a massive improvement is the infotainment system. We have a bigger display with more powerful hardware and brand new software. This is where I need to make a big disclaimer. Not all ID.3 facelifts have this upgraded infotainment system. And that's because when VW launched the ID.3, there was quite a bit of criticism, and to address some of those concerns as soon as possible, the cosmetic changes have been brought forward by a year. So you could get the facelift from about 2023, whereas there was still some development time needed for the technology and drivetrain improvements, which I will get onto in just a second. So the newer infotainment system is only available on cars from about early 2024. But let me show you around it so you can actually decide whether it's worth seeking out the newer examples, which are naturally more expensive, with the upgrades present. Firstly, as everybody says, yes, the touch sliders for the volume and temperature controls are now backlit. This is difficult to show during the day, but they do indeed light up at night, like they should have done from the get-go. And yes, it's still all of this touch stuff, but it seems a bit more responsive than before. And very importantly, because the screen is bigger, you no longer have to do the two-finger touch to activate heated seats, because there's also a heated seat button right in the infotainment system itself, without you having to go into any of the menus, because the AC controls are now permanently present at the bottom of the screen. Next up, the wireless phone charger actually works now. In the top left corner of the infotainment system, you can see that the phone is charging happily. And that's because despite the same design as before with this pocket, there is now some active ventilation in there, so the phone no longer overheats. And despite me having a phone with a MagSafe case, the magnets no longer seem to interfere with the charging coil. So my guess would be that VW integrated more charging coils regardless of how you place your phone or what exact phone you have. It will now charge without any issues. With the head unit itself, despite the software updates improving the responsiveness of the previous generation infotainment, this is on a whole different level, especially when you go into the map. The zooming and the scrolling now works as you would expect it to. It's still not quite on the same level as Tesla, but it's much better and it's really getting there. You also can customize the top shade. Apple CarPlay works in full screen mode with just leaving the dock for the air conditioning controls right at the bottom. The app drawer has been redesigned. However, there are two very crucial new features. Firstly, if I go to the home screen and into the charging menu, I now have a new sub-menu to optimize the battery. What does that mean? Finally, on-demand battery preheating in wintertime for optimal rapid charging sessions. Just to be clear, if you use the built-in navigation system and you search for a destination, which is very far away, let's go to Edinburgh today as the usual example. You see, even the search seems to be a lot quicker than before. Start navigation.
The route shown. The next stopover is on a limited access road.
The route plan was pretty much calculated instantaneously, including the charging stops. And just like with the previous version of the ID software, it tells us how much battery we will have on arrival and how long we need to charge for. But crucially, if the battery is not warm enough, it will start preheating automatically in the background en route to make sure that you get the shortest possible charging time. But for people who prefer to use Waze or Google Maps through their phone, be it Apple CarPlay or Android Auto, you can now do so, and when you are getting close to the charger and if you know that it's winter time, you can just hit that preconditioning button and it will start heating up the battery manually. And yes, it's one of those things which you didn't have to worry about when refueling a combustion engine car, but what helps is this user interface. It's very clear that currently, at this very moment, if I plugged into rapid charger, I will get 56 kilowatts, and if I pressed start battery heating, which it can do now, it knows that it will take 20 minutes, and after said time I would get up to 69 kilowatts. That's obviously because I'm at quite high state of charge, being at 63%. In case you're new to EVs and none of what I said makes sense to you, you can press this info button and it explains all you need to know about rapid charging. The second aspect, which applies to all modern vehicles regardless of fuel source, are the ever increasingly more annoying safety features with all the beeps and bongs. But in good news, they actually don't seem to be that annoying in these ID.3s. The speed limit warning is a very faint bong, and I didn't know this was possible, but there seems to be a bit of a tolerance above the speed limit. So it only seems to start flashing at you with the speed limit sign in the instrument cluster once you go 2 miles per hour over the recognized limit, and only if you exceed by 3 miles per hour, then you start getting the audible warnings. And those only repeat a couple of times and they go silent again, even if you're still above the speed limit. No, I didn't break the speed limit by testing this. It's just if I go through the Blackwall tunnel, it's one of the roads where the speed limit is consistently incorrectly recognized. And if you're in a scenario like that, or you absolutely can't stand the system, there is now an easy way of disabling it. So regardless of where you are in the infotainment, even with your CarPlay running, you can just press this button, which brings up a panel of shortcuts to do with the vehicle safety features. And speed limit warning is a single click away. The lane assist is also a single click away now, and so is the driver attention monitoring. If you want to, you can also add additional dials in here, or you can customize what's present. Rather confusingly, there's the drowsiness monitor and the driver attention monitoring as two separate items. But as far as I can see, the ID.3 doesn't seem to have a driver monitoring camera anywhere in the cabin, which would imply the system monitors the steering and pedal inputs and only issues a warning if it thinks that you are getting tired. So that means that if you are speaking to your passenger or you yawn once, you will not get a warning in the dashboard. And from my experience with the car, I haven't had a single false positive, so I would be happy to leave that on all the time. Lastly, let me geek out about the drivetrain, because it doesn't seem like much has changed on the surface, but in fact the entire lineup of batteries has been revised. It's very complicated to keep track of all the batteries VW offers, so I will just put the specs up on the screen if you want to read through that. But basically the pure model now has much more usable capacity, which translates to more range. The middle battery pack, which this car also has, which I still think is the pick of the entire lineup, has increased in capacity by only 1 kWh, which you may think, oh, the buffers have decreased. That's not the case. It's a brand new pack which now charges much quicker. In the past it used to be just over half an hour, so nice improvement there, especially combined with the ability to precondition. It should mean much faster road trip times. And lastly, the biggest battery pack. This is dependent on which market you are in, but in the UK I believe all cars get the same battery pack as the highest GTX trim level, which means slightly more energy capacity and faster charging. But to go with it is a slightly revised chassis, which means that even if you go for the big battery version now, you do not have to sacrifice the middle fifth seat. Unfortunately, the AP550 motor, which now lives in the majority of these MEB platform EVs, is still only reserved for the top spicy GTX version, which is a bit of a shame, because not only does it bring more torque and power, so focus on performance, but it also enhances efficiency. But to be fair, I never had issues with the ID.3 being inefficient. In fact, with both of the examples I had, I would regularly get over 5 miles per kilowatt hour, and sometimes I would touch 6 miles per kilowatt hour on my commutes through London traffic if the weather was nice. You'll probably get about 5 extra miles of motorway range on this 59 kilowatt hour battery versus the previous generation 58 kilowatt hour pack. In terms of driving feel and dynamics, it's pretty much unchanged, but that's one of the things which was praised about the original ID.3. So it's not like there was a need to mess with something which wasn't broken. The suspension still strikes a very good balance between comfort and body control without feeling trashy over speed bumps and potholes. And actually maybe the brake pedal feels a tiny bit more linear and consistent than before, but that could just be because this is a brand new car with brand new pads and discs, and over time it will change its characteristics a little bit. And also the reason why my car is in the workshop is because the brake pedal was faulty. So I would definitely need to drive the Facelift side by side with the OG to be able to tell for sure. One thing which I can't tell you without hesitation is that I'm not a huge fan of these Bridgestone tires. The previous ID.3s I had were on Continentals, and they just feel much quieter and more refined without any perceived impact on energy efficiency. And I think that's where I'm going to leave it, because that should have covered all the most important things. I'm afraid there is no denying that the reputation of the ID.3 has been slightly ruined by the very rocky start. But now, with the two biggest issues sorted, that being the interior quality and the infotainment system, combined with the more aggressive pricing than ever, they are very easy to recommend either as brand new, or with the push-down prices on the used market, you can find pre-facelifts for well under £20,000 with sensible mileage, lovely condition and good specification. So let me know in the comments what you think. Has VW done enough to address all the criticisms? Other than that, if you enjoyed the video, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe if you want to see a lot more ID.3 content. Thank you again for watching, and as always, I will see you in the next one.